Thirdly, remember that a lot of this rhetoric that you hear from these people is insincere. When they're talking about Scotland has a democratic right to decide its own future, they're insincere about that, because imagine if, God forbid, there was a second referendum. Imagine we won it again. Do you think they're then going to accept that that's the democratic solution, that that's the democratic result? Do you think that they're then going to say, oh, okay, fair enough, we'll shut up now? Of course not. Of course not. They're going to say something like, oh, all that proves is Scotland has a democratic right to hold a third referendum that they lose. And then they'll say, well, Scotland has a right to decide its own future in a fourth referendum. You know, so it's just like insincere rhetoric, which is only being used in order to bolster and promote their policy of trying to break up the United Kingdom. They would simply disrespect the vote of Scots if they lost a second referendum anyway. They wouldn't accept that that was somehow the democratic mandate of the Scottish people. They'd give it 24 hours and they would start talking about a third referendum. We know that. So it's insincere when they talk about that. So these are three areas. You know, firstly, the principle. We can agree on the principle, but we don't agree with how that principle is being used to justify a policy of breaking up the country. Secondly, when they talk about democracy, they're only looking at it from their own narrow perspective. They're not acknowledging and accepting our democratic mandate as unionists. And thirdly, they're insincere anyway, because if they lost a second referendum, they would start talking about a third referendum and how it was a democratic right of Scots to have a third referendum and a fourth referendum and a fifth referendum. And then if they ever won it, do you think they're going to stand up for our democratic right to have another to oppose it? Of course not.